Greetings. Glad that you are able to make it back to Womb Health Part 2. If you haven't got a chance to look at Part 1, go back and listen to it. That was our last week's tutorial. This episode will mainly be about fibroids and PCOS. So first we're going to talk about PCOS. When I look at a client with PCOS, which stands for, those that don't know, polycystic ovarian syndrome, I try to make clear to her that this is all about her hormones, the foods that she has been eating. Once again, the foods that she's been eating is the main culprit and the antagonist for this condition. Now, the woman's body is very, very sensitive to her mood, to her intuition. Her thoughts and her emotions basically have a direct effect on her physical and mental behavior. Now, the foods have an effect to how her garden can upload to her brain. Now, when I say garden, I mean that inside of your gut, you control how the bacteria reacts and responds and makes this breakdown of protein and then creates your neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters are then floating through your spinal fluid into your brain. So therefore, the food is the main culprit of how your mood will affect your physical and mental behavior. Now, everything that she reacts to and responds to her environment, then she's releasing or concealing with her emotions. So those hormones that are being made is controlling this PCOS. Now, I want to take you through the pathophysiology of the ovary. Now, since we are talking about PCOS, ovarian syndrome, we must start at the ovary. Now, what is the problem with this? Now, remember that I told you that there is too much LH when there's a problem with there's too much progesterone. Well, we know after 14 days, ovulation is supposed to occur. But in this case, the primary issue is there is a failure to ovulate regularly. Now, the failure to ovulate is why she is deficient in estradiol. Now, estradiol is responsible for the maturity of the egg. Matter of fact, the estradiol was not even able to produce. Now, let's look at this a little bit closer. In the normal ovarian cycle, the egg is surrounded here. The egg is surrounded by these granulosa cells. And these granulosa cells are thus surrounded by these theca cells. These are our theca cells. Normally, LH acts on the theca cells and then they produce something called androgen. That androgen then can find the granulosa cells. It can move from the theca cells down into the granulosa cells. And that granulosa cells are being stimulated by FSH. Remember, FSH is follicle stimulating hormone that produces some type of estrogen. Actually, in this case, it's a more weaker estrogen called estrone. So, they use an enzyme inside of these granulosa cells called aromatase. This is the only enzyme that is found inside of the granulosa cells. And they use that to convert it over into estradiol, that estrone converts to estradiol. And that estradiol then makes up the maturity for that egg, and that egg then ovulates and pops out down the fallopian tube as normal as it should. That is the normal case of the ovarian cycle. Now, there's a big difference when it comes to a person that has PCOS. Like I said, there's a point where there's too much LH. Normally, if a person has PCOS, it'll act on the theca cells. But there's too much androgen that's being produced in the theca cells. Too much androgen that's coming in the theca cells. And when there's too much androgen, that means she's going to have abnormal hair growth. It's called hirsutism. She's going to have obesity. She's going to have acne. And it's because of this negative feedback that's going on in this section here. So, this is what happens. Estrone is created and it creates a negative feedback. Remember, it's the weaker estrone. It's too much androgen. Now it cannot be able to produce or being stimulated by the granulosa cells. That won't even happen. So this conversion does not happen within this granulosa cell. That's a negative feedback with FSH. So this is our FSH that is supposed to happen. But LH is still going. It's increasing, therefore more androgen is being produced. That means that it bypasses the enzyme of aromatase. That does not happen because of the granulosa cells. It's being blocked by the estrone. There's no feedback here. That means it's being blocked. So there's no maturity for that egg at all. This egg stays like this and it becomes cystic. That's what happens. It causes a cystic degeneration of those follicles. You get cysts on this egg, and I'm going to show a picture right here before you, so that you can see how this pathway to understand what PCOS actually happens, how this happens. So estradiol makes her deficient, so we need to talk about, we know that this is a common abnormality in a lot of reproductive age women. Now, how do we heal this situation? We want to fix this situation. I'm always telling people that your animal protein, your fats and things that you're consuming have a big effect. So they have this name for it. Foods that are high in advanced glycogen end products. These are your animal fats, your animal proteins, and they're being cooked by either broiling, roasting, frying, and they tend to contribute to the PCOS, this syndrome that happens when you don't ovulate. So you need to eat foods that are that's not dairy, obviously. That's the worst thing. No animal protein, no animal fats. That's none of your, so basically a lot of antioxidants, a lot of mushrooms, so a lot of berries, herbs, of course. So they got this good herb called marjoram. Marjoram basically can shrink those cysts, creating something called a womb healing tea, where if there's any cyst or anything that's there, it can shrink those follicles that have become follicular cysts. So basically, stay away from those things that are if you can reduce the amount of advanced glycogen proteins or products, then you will not have PCOS. So let's go ahead and talk about fibroids at this moment. Okay, so let's dig deep into one of the most common reproductive problems in black women, as we know as fibroids. Now, a lot of students been waiting on me to get to this particular lecture so I can show them how to actually shrink this. But I did go over a lot of those different things in the PCOS lecture if you just want to skip through this. Now, over 50% of the African American women without children are more likely to have fibroids. Now, most of these women are asymptomatic, meaning that they do not have any problems with it, but they're in fact infertile. As we know, the fibroid tumor is not a cancerous tumor. So if any doctor happens to tell you this, that it's a cancerous tumor, then he's just trying to force you into removing your whole uterus, hysterectomy, and he's entirely wrong. So you might want to get out of there. But now, don't get me wrong. There is a time that it can become life-threatening, and that's what I want to show you here. Now, we already went over the anatomy of the entire uterus, so I'm just going to go over just the parts where the locations and size may matter. Now, a lot of doctors, they really focus on the size. We know that can be the size of a little pea. They can be the size of a watermelon. But in my research, I find that the location is the most important thing. Now, 55% of the women have these tumors on the outer wall of the uterus, and they call them the subserous fibroid. Just gonna spell it out here, so we know that this is only on the outside, outer wall. Then we have 40%. Now this is 55% of all black women. Now 40% of the women have them in the intramucal fibroid, found in the myometrium layer, or better yet, the inside muscle. So we call this the intramucal fibroid. And we know this to be inside muscle. Now we got 5% left, and we see that happening in the inner part of the uterus, where it protrudes into the uterus, and we call this the submucous fibroid. It protrudes inside uterus. Okay? So I need you to pay attention to where I put these tumors, because if this tumor happens to grow within this area here, say for instance, the myometrium area, we know that the myometrium has all of the blood vessels to feed to the endometrium lining. So that means if this tumor grows in the myometrium, it can cause those endometrium linings to shed much faster, much heavier, and that calls for a profuse bleeding. Now, a lot of women lose a lot of blood because of this. This is what we call maybe life-threatening, because she needs a blood transfusion. And the ending result of that, because this is growing, she has to get a myomectomy. That's removing the whole lining of the myometrium. Therefore, she won't have any bleeding at all. She's done for it. No more bleeding at all. This one can change the whole inside of the uterus. If it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, that means it's changing the shape of the uterus. That means that she can be infertile because it's changing the passageway of the sperm to reach the egg and become pregnant. So the submucous fibroid can become very life-threatening and cause you not to have children. Now, up here on this outer wall, this is kind of when I will start to recommend surgical removal. It can shrink naturally, but it can become very life-threatening if it grows and keeps growing. Now, on this outer wall, we have the bladder. So it means it can press against the bladder and cause painful urination. Every time she pees, she can have bleeding through her urination. It can also press against the colon. It can block the colon also. So if she's having frequent constipation and in pain when she's defecating, or bleeding when she's defecating, then it's becoming a means for a hysterectomy. Now, that's the only time I would probably recommend that. Any other time, I would just go for the natural route. Now, it is such a terrible thing to lose your uterus. I don't like to recommend that at all. Now, only is it physical, but it's spiritual. It's a spiritual aspect to losing what the Creator has given you to procreate. Now, I believe that uterus has a special emotional connection to men out there, but I'm not really gonna talk about that here. So, right now I'm just gonna go into the remedies. Some of these fibroid juices. Now, I just drunk a juice with 2 cups of spinach, some parsley, some about 2 or 3 stalks of celery, and some cucumbers, some apples, some lemon, and I always make sure I throw some ginger in there. Now, this helps the liver metabolize all of those estrogens, really breaks down all of those estrogens, lowers it, and even stops that tumor from growing. Now, if you use that together, you drink that twice a day for the next maybe 2 months, 60 days, you're going to see a tremendous shrinkage in those tumors. Now, this not just happens or just works with fibroids. It happens with cancer tumors, in the breast. I also use another one, another juice that has a lot of beets in it, because you got to help that liver detox. I use the beets, the lemons, the ginger, use the spinach for the iron, because a lot of women may lose a lot of blood. If she's having this tumor right here, she needs some more beets, some more spinach to help that iron deficiency that she's been having, the heavy menstruation that she's been having. Now, I've been creating this tea, womb healing tea. It will be, for the first of the year, I have these tea boxes created. What has this special herb called marjoram and lady's mantle. Those 2 together will help shrink cysts and fibroids. Also, you can add another supplement called calcium D-glucarate, which helps lipid metabolism in that glucuronidation pathway that I talked about in our liver detox tutorial. Now, there's a lot of information that I'm throwing out here. Hopefully, if you can just juice for 60 days, 90 days, if you keep going, you will completely beat out fibroids. You don't have to go see that knife. You don't have to go get cut or burned. That's all they can really offer you. So I want to thank you guys for listening. This is a very important matter. If you have any problems with this, please contact me. Until next time, shalom.